everyone to participate in these fundraisers. In the past, we've traditionally had students raise a large chunk of money towards the price of their trip. All of the fundraising profits that students have been accumulated over the years, if it's a senior and they've been fundraising for a number of years, all of that money is available and it will all be credited on the final invoice of the trip payment. Now, deviations and extensions. We're not recommending that you deviate from the tour for any reason. And a common thing is people that want to arrive early, or after we depart they want to stay a few extra days with their family. We're really not recommending it, and the reason is quite simply because of our group air record. These tickets are not booked on an individual basis, and we don't have the ability to customize if you want to fly here or there. This is a group tour, and really it's the kind of thing to where it's a lot more challenging to travel with a group of 300 than it is to travel with a family of 4. So when we make our planning, we always plan things in the best interest of the entire group.
And as you read, if you do choose to extend, or that's something you have to do, what we will do is treat that on an individual basis. And what we've done for families in the past is we've removed the airfare completely from our program, freeing up a family to get their own air. But it is a little complicated, as Dan said, because of you've got to arrive in Madrid. When we arrive, you've got to meet the student to have a pass off at the ends, because they're not going to let a student fly alone anywhere. It gets complicated. So if that's something, though, that just is something you feel you have to do for some reason, you've got family in Spain, you want to spend an extra week with, something like that, that would be an individual. The chain of command there will be to go through the Shaker staff, and then they'll work with us and we'll talk about it.
I think you'll probably find it a bit challenging, though, because Jeff Goldsmith of Grand Tours has purchased all the airspace in and out of Spain for the time over there. So,
the early bird gets the worm.
Yeah, no student is allowed to travel alone. We want to make sure that everyone is safe and we have everyone accounted for at all times. We don't want to leave anyone at the airport. Now, if you want to go as a parent, you have a couple options. You can go either on the shadow trip, or you can go as a chaperone, and we're going to talk a little bit about both. The shadow tour is essentially a completely separate tour that mirrors the band tour. We put the parents in separate hotels, maybe a little bit fancier hotel, maybe a slightly altered itinerary, and rather than perhaps taking a 6-hour bus all the way to Chicago, you get to fly right out of Cleveland Hopkins.
For sure. The Shadow Tour has been a big part of the Shaker band travel, and so on the online registration site, parents, you'll see 2 or 3 questions related to the Shadow Tour. If you have a strong interest in that, there's no commitment, but you can put in those radio buttons on there. That will tell us about how many are interested, and then we will craft a brochure just like you have tonight for what we would call a family and friends tour, and like Dan said, separate bus, your own guide, separate hotels, but mirroring the band's itinerary, and you would be at all the concerts as well. And often, if there's enough space, we've done the farewell dinner together, which you can imagine 350 people, it's a big deal. That tour we will launch this summer, and your interest indicator will be telling us that you'd like to receive that information. Typically in price, the Shadow Tours have been similar to up to maybe 200 more based on a smaller number of people, and we try to upgrade the hotels a little bit. For parents, there might be something like maybe we visit a winery or something like that. We do some adult things on the tour as well that are different than the student tour, because they're not visiting those, of course. But we make it fun for the parents, and chaperoning's great. Dan, you can talk about chaperoning. Yeah. Shadow tour, you don't have to do the chaperoning.
The shadow tour is really important because this trip is really student-centered. Our goal, we care about the parents. We love you. We want you to come with us. We want you to come see your children perform at the Roman Aqueduct or at the castle. But our focus is really on the students. And this is why we try to keep the students and the parents separate. We want to create experiences where the students have to be responsible by themselves and get to experience a new culture. And so if anyone asks me, well, how come, that you keep the students and the parents separate? This is a learning and an educational experience, as I said at the beginning. So that's kind of our whole philosophy. And it's aligned with our International Baccalaureate philosophy of being risk takers and being worldly. So that's a little bit about the Shadow Tour.
And I just want to highlight that if you check those things, we won't be sending it out in the next few days. That's going to come out this summer once we see the size of the band. Then we'll put out a Shadow Tour program.
If you are interested in being a chaperone, we have here, our directors, Mr. Hughes, Mr. Clemens, Mr. Deep, have some yellow forms. This is simply a form of if you are interested in being a chaperone. Now, I have to say, if you're interested in being a chaperone, there's a process that we go through. The first thing you have to understand is not everyone who is interested in being a chaperone will we select and take with us on the trip. What we do is we wait until all the registrations are in, June 12th, all the deposits are in, June 19th, and we really determine the needs of our group. How many male students, how many female students, what's the number of students we want per chaperone, how many chaperones do we need on each flight pattern, how many buses are we taking, and we really start to determine our needs. If you're interested, you might be the type of person, you either want to be a chaperone or go on the shadow trip. Or, no, I just want to be a chaperone, I have no interest in going on the shadow trip, please take me as a chaperone. Before you leave tonight, take one of these yellow chaperone interest forms and take the time to read through it and fill it out. Understand our process, though. We won't start to make the selection for chaperones until all the registrations are in and we start to look at the data over the summer.
Dan, I should add to that and say, if you, for example, register for the Shadow Tour and then were selected as a chaperone, we would move you between the two. Or if you applied for a chaperone, weren't selected and said, I still really want to go, then we would take you on the Shadow Tour. So just so there is that flexibility, we're not going to lock you into one or the other.
There's a couple things you can do. When you go online to register, as Jeff said, you'll see a couple of boxes. One is, are you interested in the Shadow Tour? You can click yes or no. Another is, are you interested in being a chaperone? You can click yes or no. If you're not sure, I recommend everyone fill out the yellow form and turn it in, okay? Understand that chaperones typically pay the full price of the tour. In the past, the band boosters have traditionally contributed a little bit to give the chaperones a slight discount on the trip. We have no way of knowing what our budget is going to be and what our budget for the band boosters and what kind of contribution they'll be giving. Again, we need to wait until all the registrations are in and really start to go through the process of what our needs are and what we need. So if you're interested, you can definitely take a chaperone form. Okay, online registration. Jeff was so good because, okay Dan, I put the website up, I want you to go on and I want you to register yourself like a fake registration, and so I came up with some really funny names. Like one night I was hoping...
There are 4 people already registered for the tour.
They were all me, right? So my suggestion is, when you sit down to register, the first thing you should do, use an email that you check frequently, okay? And Jeff has a fail-safe system. When you register online, the first thing you'll do is enter your email address twice, and so make sure that it matches. And then you'll be sent, when you're at the end of the whole process, you'll be sent a confirmation email confirming your reservation. But I really suggest that you take your time and make sure you go through and read the fields and enter the data correctly. It's going to save us a lot of time in the planning process.
The key for us is air ticketing now is there's no flexibility. So with many of you probably not having passports yet, think like you have one. In other words, what are you going to put on the passport application? Proper last name, proper first name, proper middle name if you have one. If you don't have a middle name, just put no middle. We'll know that. your accurate date of birth and gender. Those are critical. That's what every air ticket has to have. So make sure you get all of that correct. And like Dan said, just take your time and get the information right the first time, and then you won't have to come back in and make adjustments. You do not need your passport to register. Those are optional fields. If you have a passport, go ahead and put in the number and the expiration date. And then the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. Once you register and get a confirmation, our accounting office will create an invoice for that traveler or travelers. If you have 2 children going on the trip, when you complete the registration process, you'll see add another person. You can link the siblings together by that. Those that get selected for chaperones, you can go in and register later. There won't be a problem with that. We'll reopen the site for that. But take your time. But once accounting creates an invoice, it might take 3-4 days because we might have 60 registrations come in overnight. You'll get it within 3 or 4 days, and then you can process your deposit. There's no need to do it the day you register. If you get a confirmation, you know you're going, and we know your deposit is coming. So there will be no worries in that regard.
Also in the online registration, there are several important fields. There's a field for any dietary needs, any things like you can select vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, and then it'll ask you your t-shirt size because everyone gets a t-shirt, and so make sure you just take the time. And also the software that Jeff uses is pretty slick. And if you're using an older computer, you might want to update your software or update your Java or something, or use a new computer. I don't recommend that you register with an iPad or a tablet or your phone. I recommend you're sitting down at a computer when you register. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes.
And if you do have trouble, our info box, info@grandtoursinc.com, just send us a note. We'll call you or we'll help you. It's pretty simple.
So again, the important dates. The registration site is open now. You could register right after you leave. And if you like, it's open until July 12th. The first deposit is due by June 19th. Again, if you register after the deadline, you'll be placed on a waiting list until we can secure more airspace, and the price may increase. And all registrations will be processed in the order in which they were received. The next step in the process, after you leave tonight, registration is open. You can go register. The next most important thing is that everyone make sure they have a passport. And especially if you have a non-US passport, or if you're a non-US citizen, or someone in your party that's traveling is a non-US citizen, we need to make sure that we get the process started to get a travel visa. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, if you are, and we see that often, if you're on a non-resident passport, we often use Perry Visa service in Chicago. So perryvisa.com, you can research the requirements if you want. But if you have that situation, let us know, and we can recommend that, or maybe It's Easy passport and visa. So a couple different options for you.
And then, of course, as Jeff mentioned, if you do want to purchase trip cancellation coverage, you typically got to do that within 14 days.
Yeah, for pre-existing medical conditions, or that category of insurance that's new called cancel for any reason insurance, that typically has also got a 14 to 21 day window. And I put a couple